Nobody gets it perfect. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about progress. Getting in the habit of asking yourself, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? We have agency. We have agency over our mindset. I want people to feel mentally stronger and mentally more viable and more flexible and quicker to go through and do what they need to do.
Hey everyone, before diving into the episode, I want to take a moment to invite you into our mindbodygreen ecosystem, where you can explore the infinite possibilities of health and well-being. All you have to do is click the subscribe button to hear more thought-provoking interviews with leaders in the health space. I am so grateful for all of you who have tuned in over the years, and let me tell you, it's only going to get better. So what are some of the less obvious little things that we're maybe doing daily that are slowly chipping away at our brain health?
So I think it's important to have a to-do list and also a not to-do list. And so we could kind of switch back and forth between those two areas. I realized very early on that the point of learning is application, that you listen to a podcast. The truth is all the podcasts and the books and the lectures, none of it works unless we work it. You and I have talked about that quote in the book, Limitless, where it says life is the letter C between B and D, where B is birth, D is death, life is C, choice. And I realized that there are 4 choices we could make if we want to make some kind of change. And so pulling back at a 30,000 foot view, we could either stop something, we could start something, we could do less of something, or we could do more of something. Those are only 4 choices if we want to make an effective change. And so I realized that to really simplify this at any given time, we could start something new. We could start meditating, or we could start journaling, we start reading, we could start exercising, we could stop something, eating those high sugar foods, we could stop smoking, we could stop something, or we could do less of something. We could do less of the things that are not getting us to where we want to go. That could be draining our mental energy, our focus. You could do less binge watching television, right? Or you could do more of something that you're already doing, right? If you're already kind of exercising, you could be moving more, right? If you're already meditating, potentially you can be meditating more. If you're eating those brain foods, you can be doing more of it. I think some of the things the small little things are sometimes the big things. And so our devices, so maybe we could start there, right? They're driving us to distraction. They're driving us to reaction. I talk about 4 supervillains in the book and how to overcome them. And they're driven by technology. They're not caused by technology, but they're definitely amplified. And I think people feel digital overload, right? They feel digitally distracted. There's something called digital dementia, where it's the high reliance on like an external memory storage, so you don't have to use your own memory. And then this thing that I termed digital deduction, where they found out that this generation, they're not making, for the first time, they have less ability to rationalize, to critically think than the previous generation. And they're attributing some of it to technology, where the technology is actually doing the thinking for us with algorithms. And it's kind of feeding us how to be able to get from here to there, simple maps, or, what they recommend us to eat, or something simple like that. And so, so I think that having a digital fast could be useful, a digital detox. Some people call it a dopamine detox. And I know it's not easy, because the high reliance on technology for our work or for school or for communication. But it's been, with my experience, we're working with clients, that if you could even schedule 45 minutes, and your phone, I think one of the most powerful, functions on your phone is airplane mode, just turning it off and having white space to think, to be able to breathe. The human brain wasn't set up to take in all this information. Like we have unfeathered access to everything just through swipes and scrolling. And the brain, it's very depleting to the brain. If you're suffering from mental fatigue, going through all that, they call it context switching. I mean, you could go through thousands and thousands of different contexts, in a very short period of time. And the brain, it lights up different parts of the brain. It's also kind of like a form of multitasking. So I would start, to sum this up, getting in the habit of asking yourself, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? Is what I'm watching, or who I'm spending time with, or what I'm consuming, either through information, or food is a form of information also as well. Is staying up and pulling all-nighters, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? It's always being on my digital device, so I'm so like high strung. Is this something that is good, or is it something that could be detrimental? Also, I think one of the great habits to get into for all of us, since our brain controls everything, and if you want to master your mind, is just getting the habit of filtering through what's important for you and what's serving your highest self, as opposed to what's pulling you back, and realizing that the choices that we make, and we make so many unconscious choices throughout the day, mostly out of habit and routine. But when did we actually sit down and actually design those routines for greater productivity, for greater performance, for greater prosperity, and also for greater peace of mind? Peace of mind is the highest currency, especially today, with so much fear and so much stress through media and through social media. So, I think a healthy dose of perspective and agency, where we are that thermostat, not a thermometer. We don't have to react to every single thing. We could respond intelligently and have a level of state management and cultivating that state regulation, where, if you're going through a storm right now, realizing some perspective that sometimes there's some things we can only learn in a storm, right? And some storms come because they're there to clear our path, but there's always something to be able to look forward to. And I'm talking to people who are really struggling right now. If you're wondering if you can survive, I'm sure there's been a time in your life where you thought you wouldn't survive, but you did. If you're listening to this right now, you certainly did, and you will again. And you inspire people with your grit and your grace. So life, it comes down to making these choices. And sometimes we have to choose things that are hard. But sometimes by doing the hard thing, life gets a little bit easier. Sometimes if we do the easy things in life, binge watch or procrastinate something, and life gets harder over time also as well. So it is hard to be broke. And it's hard to start a business, or, to make money. It's just we make those choices. It's hard to be sick and unhealthy. And sometimes it's hard to meal prep. It's hard to get yourself to move every single day, to go to bed at a certain time. And nobody gets it perfect. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about progress. It's about advancing and progressing. Because I feel like in order for us to feel happy and feel fulfilled, everything in nature does two things. It either, it's green and it grows, or it's brown and it rots. So we always have to be growing. And I also feel like everything in nature has to give back to the system, get back to the ecology. And when we grow and we give, then I feel like it's a nice foundation, especially if we're grateful. Gratitude is also, something we hear all the time, but maybe because we hear it all the time, oh, we should be grateful and do these gratitude exercises and keep a gratitude journal, that we dismiss it. Sometimes what keeps us from getting to the next level, some people call it mastery. I don't really use the word, that word, because I feel like there's always another level. But sometimes what keeps us from that level of expertise or that growth is saying to ourselves, "Oh, I know that already." I've heard this on the podcast before, right? Other people have talked about brain foods or getting a good night's sleep. But I realized, spending time with some of the most amazing high performers in the world, that they lean into the fundamentals. They get really excited about the basics. And I just want to remind everyone not to lose that, because that foundation really is that 80-20 rule, that Pareto's principle, where 20% of your efforts is giving you 80% of the rewards. So, I like it, even in parenting, right? With the kids, maybe you're really strict with their diet and this is what you have in the house, but they go to school or they go to a birthday party and, they explore different sweets or processed foods. Asking them afterwards, just like, how do you feel? Letting them sit with that a little bit. And I feel like ultimately we are our best coaches. And that feedback is the breakfast of superheroes. I've said a lot, but ultimately the core idea behind this is we have agency. We have agency over our mindset. We have a responsibility for our own motivation. We have a sovereignty when it comes to our own strategies in terms of what we choose to do on a regular basis. And you could ask yourself, are these habits, the routines, behaviors, thoughts, actions, are they getting me closer to who I really am? Remembering who you are, or is it pulling me in a different direction? And changing course, every single day, much like we do when we're driving or an airplane, right? It's just kind of, am I getting closer to this destination, who I want to be, to have what I want to share with the world? Or am I stalling? Am I getting a little stuck, or am I actually backsliding? It's not necessarily easy, but it's pretty simple, right? I think most people who are listening to this, they probably have forgotten more because they listen to all this, and maybe they've probably forgotten more about health and wellness and self-growth and personal development more than most of their friends and most of their family, right? But also, it's a good, nice to be an inspiring example for somebody else. Yeah, so I would kind of pause there with everybody, just realizing that we have decisions every single day, and we make thousands of them consciously and unconsciously. And that these difficult times, they could distract you, they could diminish you, or they could develop you. You know, ultimately, we decide with those choices. So maybe I'll offer everybody up a challenge. You know, do you want to? What's one thing you should stop? What's one thing you should start? What's one thing you want to do less of? And what's maybe one thing you want to do a little bit more of? Because the fifth option is do nothing, right? But then nothing changes. If nothing changes, nothing changes, right? So insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We've heard that countless times. But are we living that way? And so, like small little choices, like being conscious of the things that might be depleting us, the foods or the information, the digital devices, or are we feeding our body, our mind, things that are nourishing? Because what you nourish flourishes, right? But sometimes we're on autopilot and we're not really standing guard to our mind or our body. And then we suffer the consequences.
So you mentioned being on autopilot and our reliance on devices. And I want to bring it back there. You know, you mentioned maps, and I grew up in a time when there was no Google and there were no cell phones. And so I think of two things that I had to know by heart. I knew probably 50 to 100 phone numbers by heart. Granted, there were no area codes because everyone lived, most of my friends were local, although I did have a handful of friends that weren't. But I knew those phone numbers by heart. Maps. I knew definitely the town I lived in and the surrounding towns and even greater parts of Long Island and Westchester and Connecticut, but because I've traveled there, in Jersey by heart. And I think of those muscles today. Huh. I know my mother's phone number. I know my wife's phone number. I know 911. That's about it. And then with maps, I even find myself, I know we live in Miami. I know my way around for the most part where we live and where our kids go to school, but I still plug in the phone and look at maps. And I'm thinking to myself, these were really important cognitive muscles that I've maybe completely lost, and I'm trying to reconcile this with you. Is this a good thing? Maybe it wasn't the best use of my cognitive firepower, if you will, and it's better. I'm better served thinking about other things, or maybe this is a mistake. I should try to start to remember phone numbers and not rely on Google Maps for everything.
Well, I could tell you if it's been my experience, and this is, I'm also in the 50 and older kind of category, so I could definitely relate to not having to remember. I mean, remembering numbers back then and not having to do so now. So let's unpack this a little bit. So let's talk about the maps first. There was a study done in London with London taxi drivers, and they found that they have to do a rigorous testing where they have to prepare and study for years in order to pass their exam and know really all the roads in their locale. And because of it, there was parts of their brain that were more dense, right? That were bigger and had more connections. And it's a testament that with neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, that with novelty and study, learning, that our brain adapts and it grows. That, as the phrase goes, that brain cells that fire together, they wire together. And this is something that has been shown, even using your body in different ways. There's a study done at Oxford University that showed that jugglers, just the act of learning how to juggle, which you could do on YouTube, actually builds more white matter. The jugglers actually have bigger brains. So your brain is the ultimate adaptation tool, just like your body, and obviously your brain is part of your body. And I would correlate this with just how physical we are. So yes, we don't have to use certain mental faculties to remember numbers or remember how to get from here to there, where before we would need to, and we would exercise those mental muscles, but also physically with technology. Let's say cars and elevators, we don't have to take the stairs, right? We don't have to walk 10 blocks. We could take a car or some kind of Lyft or Uber. And yes, so all of that technology for your physical body is convenient. And just the idea here, though, is this principle of use it or lose it, right? If you want to keep in shape, technically, we could just sit all day. technically we could just sit on our screens, but then it becomes the future. Like, I don't know if people saw Wally. But I'm sure some people will remember kind of what the future looks like, where everybody is obese and overweight, and they're sitting in their chairs that move them from here to there. They're sitting on their screens and drinking their soft drinks, and it's a sad commentary, but we see the stats in terms of things like obesity. And as our Dr. Daniel Amen always says, as our waistband increases, the size of her brain decreases. And so, yes, it's very convenient to have an elevator or a car, just like it's very convenient to have a phone or some kind of GPS system to get us from here to there, or to keep our phone numbers. And I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, but it should be concerned we've lost the ability to remember one phone number or a passcode or a seed phrase, or something we just read, or something we were just about to do, or some conversation that we just had, or a meeting that we are going to have, or someone's name that we just we heard 4 or 5 times that we should definitely know by now. But sometimes I feel like it makes us like mentally a little bit lazy. What can we do to kind of keep the activity? And I'm not saying get rid of your technology. I'm very pro technology, but also I don't want it to cripple me. I don't want that convenience to cripple me. So I think everything in some kind of harmony, and that's everyone's individual choice. Like, who am I to say, like, hey, ditch your phone, or don't use it, or not, or take the stairs, right? It's just if we're looking for an outcome, and I'm suggesting that we use our mental activity, and our memory is like a muscle. We use it or we lose it. And I want people to understand that once you understand how your memory works, you could work your memory. Once you're more physically fit, I think life is just easier, right? If you need to climb that metaphorical mountain, you're going to do it with greater ease and enjoyment, because you have a strength, you have a flexibility, you have an endurance, you have vitality. Well, we're climbing mental mountains all the time. Think about our inbox, think about all your to-dos, and I want people to feel mentally stronger and mentally more viable and more flexible and quicker and greater levels of energy and endurance to go through and do what they need to do. In the book, we talk about those two factors. The fact that we forget phone numbers is what they call in healthcare digital dementia. And, getting from here to there, where we don't have the visual spatial intelligence and we're not developing that as much. I called it digital deduction, but it's one of those things where, again, I'm not saying, I think the pendulum switches, and how do you reconcile that is some form of balance.
Look, everyone's pressed for time, but many people get in their cars every day, whether they like it or not. Would we be better served if we said, all right, you know what, today I'm going to turn off the maps and I'm going to navigate by myself? Is that a good use in terms of getting the brain firing in a way where we're...
I would say for non high importance, like you're not, the minutes, maybe it's okay if you fumble. I just want people to have to know their brain, and to trust their brain again. So many people lack confidence because they lack mental competence. And so my thing is, like, same thing as I would say, like, if I need to go to the bank and it happens to be 10 blocks, if time is not pressing, I'd like to get my steps in, because walking is so important for the brain. It's one of the reasons why children learning how to crawl, as your body moves, your brain grooves and makes new connections. When you move your body, you create brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is like BDNF, which is like fertilizer for neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. So the same thinking that I would say, like, hey, if I had to go for that walk or take the stairs instead of taking the elevator up 4 floors, I would have the same level of thinking, and kind of idea and inspiration, whether or not, hey, maybe I won't rely on this. I've taken this trip to the coffee shop a bunch of times. Maybe I don't need this. And if it costs me a minute or two, it's worth it just to activate that part of my brain that might be a little bit sedated or non-active. And so I'm not saying you have to do it all the time. I train a lot of speakers to memorize their speeches. And I feel like, after you do it for a while, you just get mentally tough. So I get to see a script or bullets and kind of see it and just review it a couple of times. And it's so easy for me just to not have to rely on a teleprompter, have to rely on a PowerPoint presentation, because I've had mental muscles, for that activity, just like somebody who does some kind of form of exercise, high intensity training, weightlifting, that they show up different, right, in the world. They're not, they are not as fragile. They have some form of, resilience and capabilities. And I would just like to say, it's trying to explain somebody what it's like to read a book a day or remember languages or remember a speech or the kind of things we train people on to do, it's kind of like explaining to somebody, trying to explain like what a rose smells like or a great song who's never heard it or smelt it. But I'm here to say that we've discovered more about the human brain more in the past 20 years than the previous 2,000 years combined. And we found is we're grossly underestimating our own capabilities. And if people get nothing else out of this, it's just to be more mentally active. You know, something simple like reading. Reading is to your mind what exercise is to your body. But are you really spending time reading? Not just social media, short little sound bites, but are you exercising your mind and exposing yourself to new ideas? Because there's this quote that said, "A person's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions." Oliver Wendell Holmes. And I would suggest people to embrace this again. The two dips we see, because we have a lot of data, we have students in every country in the world. We have the largest accelerated learning platform teaching these things, and we find that the two dips in cognitive performance usually comes when people graduate school because somehow unconsciously they think, oh, my education's over, so my learning is over. And usually when people retire, because usually when people retire their minds, it's unfortunate because their bodies isn't that far behind. I would just say, as we know how important physical fitness is and physical activity is, I would just stress that mental activity is important. But sometimes we forget, like as we're scrolling through, we think we're doing mental activity when we're just being busy. We're just bombarding our mind with stimulus. And there's a difference between a signal and a noise, right? And I always tell people it's not even about time management. It's really about priority management. The most important thing is to keep the most important thing, the most important things, right? And to the degree we could prioritize the things that are most important and focus on the things that are most important to us. And it's different for every single person, right? Like who am I to say what's most important to somebody else? But just ask yourself the simple question: what's most important to me in my life? Start there and just kind of reconnect with the things that we hold dear. Maybe it's love, maybe it's growth, maybe it's contribution, maybe it's a sense of adventure. And then you could ask yourself a second question saying, are my actions every day, are they supportive, me for these values, or are they pulling me away from these values? Because I think a lot of people are burnt out, not because they're doing too much. Sometimes we're burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that are important to us, the things that make us, light us up, the things that make us come alive. So I would just say, if you want to have better visual spatial awareness, go to the gym, and maybe turn off that technology and test yourself, right? And trust yourself again. I feel like as we get better at some things, our capability grows, we can handle other things. It's been my experience that how you do anything is how you do everything. Just the same reason when we talk about morning routines and trying to do something difficult first thing in the morning, like something simple, like brushing your teeth with the opposite hand or taking a cold shower, right? It pushes yourself to do something that's uncomfortable. And then you take that same attitude and same resilience into things that matter, like having a difficult conversation with your kids that you've been avoiding, or something difficult at work, right? Or going on stage and making those videos or doing that public speaking, finding comfort in being uncomfortable.
So I love the example of brushing your teeth with your weak hand. Are there any other mental exercises that don't take a lot of time that we should just starting right now incorporate into our day if we're concerned about cognitive decline?
Yeah, so it's a whole area called neurobics. So instead of aerobics, for your body, these are neurobics, exercises for your mind, little things that don't take a lot of time, that challenge yourself in situations that are safe and not time consuming. So by the way, like, so when you brush your teeth with the opposite hand, part of it activates a different part of your brain, right? Because your right side of your brain controls your left side of your body, and your left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, right? Anything below the neck, right? And so it's not just a one-way communication; it's two-way. So that way, just using your brain obviously affects your body, but using your body affects different parts of your brain. So potentially using your opposite hand, and not just for brushing your teeth, for let's say eating or learning how to write, right? It stimulates a different part of your brain. But not only that, it's a nice way to force yourself to be present. I mentioned that memory is not, something you have. It's something that you can get fit, right? You get stronger. Same thing with your level of focus. And by brushing your teeth or eating with the opposite hand, it forces you to focus on that activity. and to be mindful of the activity instead of your mind distracting you and thinking about all the other stuff. And so I think the exercise is to exercise a different part of your brain, is to be present, because doing something novel forces you to focus. And I think that focus bleeds into other area of your life when you're on Zoom and other things. And also it's a nice gateway habit to saying, wow, I this starts feeling second nature. I can start brushing my teeth with the opposite hand or eating with the opposite hand. And what other new habits can I add into my life? So it kind of becomes like that gateway habit that's simple and easy, that you say, okay, well, maybe I could explore other habits like gratitude or exercise or some other area. So I would say using your opposite hand throughout the day will be very stimulating for your brain. Even watching something passive, like most times, I like reading because it's active. Audiobooks tend to be not so active, or television not so active, because they're just feeding you the information. With reading, you have to really get involved, right? But you can make any activity more active. You can even bring mindfulness into eating. You can even, when you watch, I was on this going down this kind of Sherlock Holmes kick. When I do it, it's not passive. And I'm not saying you can't just sit back and enjoy a good film. What I'm saying is, if you choose to exercise your mind, you could think about, like, what would I have done in that situation? Or what can I learn from what this character is going through? With Sherlock Holmes, it's great because I find that I'm like super observant, right? Like Sherlock Holmes, the incredible detective, he observes and then he deduces. And just watching his strategy, I'm like thinking about, oh, wow, I could write a book or a chapter on his own genius. And so I feel like you could take little things that you could do to activate your brain in different ways, is use a different body part. It could be, showering with your eyes closed. If you could do it safely, not lose your balance. But, even little things like, closing your eyes helps you to develop other senses as you're doing it. And you're not going to do anything well at the first time. But I think also getting yourself in the mode where you're just pliable, right? You're adaptable again, kind of like a baby, and how flexible that they are. If we could be more mentally flexible, if we could entertain an idea that we heard on social media and not automatically judge and hate or whatever it happens to be, and be able to sit with it and even hold two opposing opinions, right? It requires a learning agility. And I'm not saying it means that you validate what's being said, but I'm just saying that we don't have to just automatically react, have some kind of, emotional feeling response to something, where our nervous system just gets, highly ratcheted and revved up, because it was just presented with some kind of stimulus, right? And I'm not saying it's easy at all, but saying that it's a training. People, when they meditate, they could train, taking chaos and finding peace inside of this storm that we talked about.
And you mentioned watching Sherlock Holmes, and I'm really liking this idea of how we can watch television better. Because look, TV is going to happen, and what immediately came to mind for me. I'm a sports fan, and I also am a huge believer in exercise and playing sports. And it's better to get off the couch and actually exercise and play versus watch. But look, we all love to watch, including me. And I'm thinking, okay, a better way to watch is really to maybe, look at the players, maybe look at the movement, the strategy, see what's happening. If it's a team sport, is there a play? Like, let's see and really trying to immerse yourself in the experience could be a better, more productive way to actually enjoy the sporting event.
Yeah, I love that, and for me, this is the same thing. I stopped watching sports more in college, just because I found that I was spending like an enormous amount of time keeping up to date with everything. And that was choice, but I enjoy a good game for especially, because I love watching high performance, and we get to work with a lot of athletes, in the space, and love to be able to support them, but also learn at the same time. With Sherlock Holmes, I've just garnered lessons from watching and reading, right? That's first of all like cultivating the art of mindfulness. I'm just watching it and watching how mindful he is, going through and being presented with various situations and dilemmas. This idea that you observe, you don't just see that life is happening all around us. And as the Peaceful Warrior talks about, there are no ordinary moments, but just, noticing how we could see this, like the subtleties, the nuances, the patterns in situations. He sees something that's invisible to somebody else, because they're not training their brain to pick up on these, and you could do that by actively engaging with your environment, by questioning anomalies, right? By seeking the unusual in the usual. He's an example, another thing of continuous learning. He has vast knowledge, and it's not confined to criminology, right? He knows everything from this kind of tobacco ashes to these obscure poisons, right, that he tests. He has this wide, expert, very varied. And so he has this embrace for new knowledge. He practices the art of and science of deductive reasoning. He doesn't jump to conclusions. He arrives at them, right? He learns to piece together information, and he weighs pieces of data and evidence, and he follows a very logical path to conclusions. Even in a number of episodes and in the books, he talks about a mind palace, which I've talked about memory palaces. Mind palace is another word for it. But one of Sherlock's most famed techniques is the mind palace. It's a mnemonic device. And while he's creating an actual palace in your mind, if you're going to do it, it sounds a little bit daunting, but the core principle is about associating images around locations that you're very familiar with. And that's how he stores information. He doesn't see things as problems. He looks at everything's like it's a puzzle. That's a mental attitude. That's a mind shift, right? It's a mindset where he embraces challenge as a puzzle. It's just waiting to be solved. Adopting this mindset for anybody can, not only make obstacles more engaging, but it also trains your brain to actively search for solutions, right? So when you're faced with a problem, ask yourself, I'll even ask myself, what would Sherlock do? It's something silly like that I could try on, because I've watched so much of it. I've read so much of his work. I could put on, his hat or walk in his shoes and come to similar conclusions. And that's a wonderful way to get out of our own way. Because often when we're faced with a decision or a dilemma or a dangerous or some kind of situation, we're stuck because we go to our default, and this is how we approach a problem. But if you said like, oh yeah, like, what would somebody who is 5 times smarter than me, how would they look at this problem? What options would they see? If I was a creative person, and just actually think about the most creative person, what would they be? Would they be daunted, or how would they see things different? And even like with Sherlock's also, he was a collaborator. He worked with Watson. While Sherlock is undoubtedly brilliant, Watson has a grounded perspective as a medical doctor, right? And could shed a spotlight on aspects that Sherlock could overlook. And so this is kind of a taste in terms of, this just happens to be, what our family is kind of consuming of recent for entertainment, but it could be also empowering at the same way. So you can still get some relaxation in there, and then just get curious, because I feel like we can learn, especially through fiction, right? Nonfiction, you learn through information, but fiction, you learn through imagination, right? And even a lot of fiction has been shown to improve your EQ, which is your emotional quotient. So instead of just learning a lot of data, it improves your level of empathy, greater your ability to switch perceptual positions through a narrative, to feel what the characters are going through at any given time, come up with creative solutions, and all of that. So I just feel like everybody, and you could just take your person to model. You could be famous or non-famous. It could be fiction or nonfiction. You could go and just study what Leonardo da Vinci, Marie Curie, trailblazing scientists, and emulate like her persistence, her resilience, her amazing deep focus, right? She was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific fields. Like, that's amazing. Nobody did that before. It's just incredible. Or learned how to reconcile through studying, the life of Nelson Mandela, or how to have non-violent revolutionary, like as Gandhi. So there's so many different ways that we could just be learning, even through, like, let's say you're in school and you're studying, I don't know, like Greek mythology, and you just want to study Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and skills you want to emulate there, wisdom, strategy, not just warfare. Athena represents like a blend of intelligence with action. And so, or I'm watching with my son, I'm watching Star Wars, introducing him to Star Wars, and Yoda is just the wise mentor, right? The skills and character traits to emulate. I'm thinking, like, I'm watching this, wow, patience, incredible amount of foresight, coaching and mentorship. Yoda teaches, emphasize, the value of experiences and learning from failures. Try, it's either do or don't do. I have a lot of passion for this, because when people tell me like they're just bored, I'm just like, how can you be bored? Like we have so much, we're so blessed, as hard as the world is, and I'm not discounting that. Besides, other generations, when do we have unfeathered access to everything? I get excited about that, and the interface between all of this is our mind and our body, right? And I just feel like it's an exciting time to be alive. I have this sense of possibility that everyone who's listening to this right now can choose to be a creator and choose to be a pilot of their life and not just a passenger.
So you mentioned, I think, the deep focus of Marie Curie, if I had that right. And I think most people, well, maybe not most people, but I certainly off experience a mid-afternoon slump sometimes around 2 p.m. What should we do when faced with that mid-afternoon slump when we're maybe having a little bit of trouble focusing or concentrating?
I'm a big believer in sometimes if all you have is 40% and you give 40%, you've given 100%. I tweeted that out years ago. Part of it is you can reach, but the brain is not meant to go at high velocity all the time. So when you're having your afternoon slump, usually it's between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, knowing that you're getting diminishing returns on your efforts, right? And you're going to make more mistakes. When you're tired and exhausted, that's a perfect time to take a pit stop, just like a car, and do some self-care. I always talk about doing a brain break. And during your brain break, you do three things that are nourishing for you, three things that your brain needs. You move, you hydrate, and you breathe. Something simple like that. The brain is only 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of the energy and the nutrients. If you're dehydrated just 2%, it dramatically throws off your focus. It dramatically throws off your levels of energy and vitality. It dramatically throws off your ability to tap into that executive functioning. And just staying hydrated could boost your reaction time and your thinking speed upwards of 30%. So sometimes, like if you have that afternoon time where you're getting a lull and you're not going to be as productive and it, instead of pushing through it, is learning and listening to your body and your brain and your mind and taking a rest, right? Getting you some fresh air, or take some 10 minutes to walk the dogs. People say like, I'm too busy to like go for a walk or to meditate. If you're so stressed out and so busy, you can't even spend 15 minutes offline to like meditate, then you need to do it for like an hour. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that. So if you have that lull at 2 to 4, that's a wonderful time to take a rest, take a break, to hydrate, to do some deep breathing, some box breathing, some movement. Also as well, maybe just a quick run or some sprints, or slow down and completely and meditate and take some time for yourself and come back rejuvenated, come back refreshed. In my new book, Limitless Expanded, we talk about potentially some supplements that you might be lacking, in your system. And people could go to their doctor, do a nutrient profile. But if you're lacking vitamin D, if you're lacking your B vitamins, which are your brain vitamins, if you're lacking your omega-3s, your DHAs, it could severely compromise your hardware, your brain itself. Like we're talking about processes, like how to read faster, how to remember names, but also that's software. But you also have to take care of your hardware, which is the physical organ itself. It's just like, imagine you were given a car when you turned of driving age. But this is the thing, it's given to you for free, but this is the only vehicle you have for the rest of your life. How well would you maintain this car? You wouldn't run it on empty. You wouldn't not take care of it. You wouldn't put the wrong fuel in it. You wouldn't fill it with just the compromised fuel. You would treat it as as what it is. Or if you compare it to a high performance car or a prized $1 million racehorse, because we have this vehicle that we're born with, that we're given. But this is the only vehicle, and I'm pointing for people listening, to my body and to my brain, which obviously your brain is part of your body. But self-care is not selfish. And also there's nootropics. People want to explore different things. One of my favorite things is creatine. Most people associate creatine to working out, and certainly you get a boost with that if you're doing physical exercise, but it is incredibly good for your brain health. Now, I would stipulate, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a medical doctor, but I just read all these white papers, all these studies, and I find that there's little things that people could do that could give them a dramatic boost in their brain power. Some people, they prefer mushrooms like cordyceps or reishi to help kind of regulate some adaptogens, maybe lion's mane, which is a unique, some people call it the nootropic because it has neuroprotective effects. Research has shown that it could stimulate the synthesis of nerve growth factor in the brain, which could enhance your cognition. It could help reduce inflammation and promote overall brain health. Right. And so like little things that we potentially add, and again, search for the thing that works for you. Not everything is for everybody. Like I've mentioned numerous times on our podcast and the book, like turmeric, is great. But there's the curcumin that's in there, that's an active ingredient in turmeric, has potential anti-inflammatory effects and antioxidant benefits also as well. It could potentially cross the blood-brain barrier and has been shown in particular to help with potentially stave off Alzheimer's disease. But these are just little things that we could absorb through our foods. And if we're not getting it through our foods because we have a fast lifestyle, potentially adding into our diet or into our regimen. I prefer people get it from foods. Like if you eat eggs, the choline in eggs is very good. But if you're not eating eggs because it's not part of your diet, you could supplement with choline. And choline is a precursor to acetylcholine, which is amazing for your focus, amazing for your memory. Magnesium, you need magnesium for almost every physiological effect in your body, so that could be very good. People could look into things like bacopa or rhodiola. There's been a number of studies, double-blind crossover studies that have been shown that it helps with, brain health also as well. What the new book, Limitless Expanded, is really to talk about momentum. Like once you have your mindset, your motivation, and the methods for accelerated learning and processing information, have better focus, better memory, speed reading, all the things that we teach in the book, then we really want to focus on how do you keep that momentum. And one of the ways you could do it is through supplementation and through an area of science called neuronutrition.
You're mentioning many of my favorite supplements that I take daily and some of my favorite superfoods, including eggs. One you did not mention, which I'm curious your take on, coffee. What about black coffee and brain benefits?
So coffee has been shown to help reduce potential Alzheimer's and brain aging. Certainly people get an energetic lift and that helps them to be able to focus. So caffeine could be classified by some as a nootropic. So I love a good cup of coffee. I have to be very careful because I'm sensitive to caffeine. So I can't have it past noon. I find that it stays in my system a good 10 hours. Maybe I don't metabolize it as quickly, so I'm more sensitive to it. But I switch between coffee. Like there's also a coffee fruit extract that's also beneficial as supplementation. My go-to is more in the area of like green tea, just because my family we drank a lot of tea growing up, so that's more for me. But it could be a cultural thing. But certainly there's studies that show that coffee. I think most people who are listening are fans and use it. You just have to be careful. Like they say, research suggests you don't want to have coffee first thing in the morning, and that's most people's go-to. They say to wait about 90 minutes first, and maybe the first thing in your body is not that, because it could also be, it could take water out of your system. Something that you would probably want to take before coffee is, take your green juice or take your electrolytes, your potassium, your sodium.
I will chug 36 ounces of water with electrolytes, and then 10 minutes later, I'm having my black coffee.
And then the research seems to be supportive of that also as well. It also helps mitigate the big crash that sometimes some people feel, after drinking coffee first thing.
So I know you're short on time, and I want to touch on it because it's just so insightful and fun. The 4 brain types. Can we close with the 4 brain types?
This is what I love about this new book. More probably, it's going to help people the most. So I realized that just how when people come to me and they want to read faster, improve their memory, have better focus, I realized that everybody has a different way of learning. That it's not how smart you are; it's how are you smart. It's not how smart your kids are; it's how are they smart. And I could put people into 4 cognitive types, and I call them your brain animal. So there's a simple quiz people could go to. There's nothing to buy. It's just 4 minutes. It's free. We put it online. Hundreds of thousands of people have gone through it. It's at mybrainanimal.com. And when you go through it, you find out what your brain code is, CODE. And that's an abbreviation, an acronym for the 4 animals. So when you go through it, I'll give you a detailed report based on your brain animal, how you prefer to learn. So this is how I would approach your productivity. This is how I would approach your study, your focus, your reading faster, your memory, and even your negotiation, your team building, and so much more, how you lead. And so the C in code stands for your cheetah. And these are the fast actors. These are people that really thrive in fast-paced environments. They have a strong intuition. They adapt very quickly. The O are your owls. And your owls are very logical, as you would imagine an owl is. They love data, they love facts, they love figures. Now notice, even just the short amount of information I gave you, a cheetah and an owl would buy different. They would learn different. They would read different. They would also invest differently, also as well. right? So it's interesting. The D are your dolphins, and your dolphins are your creative visionaries. These are people who are great at pattern recognition. They have a vision usually for themselves or others or their business that maybe some people can't see yet. They have an incredible imagination and creativity. And finally, the E in code are your elephants, and your elephants are your collaborators. They work really well with people. They have strong interpersonal skills. They have strong levels of empathy. For them, they like to learn not so much solo, but more social. They're very loyal. They love things like book clubs, and team activities and communication. So even when I go through these, once you understand and what animal you are and the ones around you, it explains a whole lot. You get to know yourself in a different way. And it's kind of a fun quiz. I would be curious if people posted, we give people some art, when they, of the animal that they are. And I challenge everyone to actually post it and tag both of us in it. And so we get to see it. And I'll repost some of my favorites and see, and tell me if it's accurate or not. And for 95% of the people, it absolutely is. And just so like, if we were talking about like fantasy and stuff like that, like I'm reading, we have a 9-month-old and I'm reading him Harry Potter, and just, I'm going through it. I'm like, okay, Harry Potter is a cheetah, fast acting, intuition. Hermione is definitely the logical owl with the amount of research she does and the amount of reading she does. I would say Hagrid holds everyone together. He's definitely the elephant, right? Dumbledore, the leader, is the dolphin by far, the creative genius, the wizard that has a vision for everybody at the school and so much more. But I start seeing it everywhere. I'm like, Luke Skywalker is a cheetah, right? Captain Picard is a cheetah. Data is the owl, right? Counselor Troy is the empath, the therapist that really understands, has high levels of empathy. So I start seeing this everywhere. And once you take the quiz, it's kind of like people taking a health, like a personalized medicine. Like, maybe not everything's for everybody, but you find what works for you, or personalized nutrition, right? So this is like what you'll get after you go to the mybrainanimal.com is personalized reports, like personalized learning based on your brain animal type. So I'm curious if you share it with your team, which most people do. Like, we notice that every single person in customer experience, customer support, they're all elephants. High levels of empathy, loyalty. They're there for you. They have your backs. Our CFO is an owl, and you want your CFO to be very logical, right? Very number data, generated.
You don't want your CFO to be creative.
Right. Exactly.
To some degree, we'll have some level of creativity, but not with the numbers.
And our CEO is our creative visionary, and she's our CEO. My business partner is definitely a dolphin, and it's so wonderful. And so all the research we put into Limitless Expanded, I pulled when I created this assessment for clients years ago. I pulled from preferred learning styles, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. I pulled from multiple intelligence theory, Howard Gardner's work out of Harvard. I pulled out of introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, pulled from personality types like Myers-Briggs. So many left brain, right brain, lateralization, dominance theory, and so I was inspired by a lot of various science and psychological tests. And this is kind of something fun you could do. Everyone likes to know, like, what Game of Thrones character am I, the kind of thing. So yeah, I invite people to do that. And also so much more in the book.
Yeah, the quiz is just a tremendous, fun, free resource. I encourage everyone to take it along with pick up the book. I'll hold it up, Limitless. It is just tremendous for anyone concerned about their cognitive well-being, which is everyone. We all should be. I think that's pretty clear. It is just such a tremendous resource. So I encourage everyone to pick it up. Is there anything else, Jim, we haven't touched on?
I want to thank you. Like, having had my traumatic brain injury as a child and having learning difficulties, my mother became a special education teacher in the public school system to help me with my learning difficulties. And having lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's, really puts me on a track of taking my mess and turning into my message. And so I want to thank you for helping us, share this with your community. The main thing I want to say is that your brain is your number one asset that you have, and doesn't come with an owner's manual. It's not always user friendly. So if you're struggling with your focus, your forgetfulness, your level of happiness, your stress levels, your what you're outputting, it's not your fault. We're just not shown. There are no classes on how to do this back in school. So I wrote Limitless Expanded as a current owner's manual for a post-pandemic AI world where it could help you not only catch up and keep up, but really get ahead. I just feel like that there's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting. And the goal is we show up for ourselves every single day, and we show up for others every single day until we're introduced.
Amen. Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.